Welcome to Modus Cafe. Join us for fun, lighthearted, and educational conversations around training, athletic longevity, and the human side of climbing. With your hosts, Mercedes Pollmeyer and Katja Dev.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Modus Cafe. Today with a somewhat interesting episode, but it's something that we see a lot and it's really important to talk about. But and a lot of you might relate to this, but it's definitely something that can rub people the wrong way a little bit. So there's some heads up, but that's what we're here for. We're here to really help you get the best out of your training. So what we want to talk about today is ego in training and how ego can hold us back. And what we want to talk about today is some things that might help you put your ego aside. And when I say ego, I'm not talking about someone being like, oh, I have this big ego, because I think I'm the best. It's really that we all have the natural tendency to want to perform, especially in an environment where there's other people. But we have to keep in mind that when we train, we're not performing. And sometimes when we have this tendency to want to perform, it's actually holding us back from training well. Because often, or I don't want to say often, because that's individual, but it can really miss the point of training. And there's a few topics that we have in mind that we want to talk about where we see that happen quite a bit. Okay, let's dive into this, Mercedes. Do you want to get started with one area where you feel like you see people's ego? And again, ego is not this big thing. It's just this resistance to not want to feel bad about oneself in some ways when we train.
Yeah, I see this a lot in, well, just like training programs where if something is written down and it says, like do 5 reps, 3 sets of 5 reps for your squat. And if this is kind of the first time, and actually people who are actually familiar with this exercise and understand their weight, they're always starting with something way too heavy. And so this is one area where it's really simple to fix, but it feels somehow really bad if we start with too light of a weight. Like it feels like, oh man, I'm super weak, or you're showing people around you that you're really weak. Instead of thinking, I'm going to start really light and just check in with where my body is at. I'm going to work on my motor pattern, my movement skill first with these lighter weights, and then just see where my body's at over the next 3 sets. So this is like a big one for all of our trainees who come into a training program for the first time. No matter how many times we talk to them about start off really light, they end up going way too heavy. And so this is like a common mistake. And I also see this in when I prescribe endurance drills, endurance climbing drills, where, like the goal is to work on movement patterns to continue moving through the gym. And people believe that, even at an endurance level, you need to be pushing yourself and working really hard to the point of fatigue. And so they end up climbing things that are way too hard. And now by the time they're getting to the end of the drill, they're having to go way, way easier on their climbs. But the worst part of it is that their movement is no longer any good. And so now that they've kind of lost the essence of that drill. Yeah. And the level of your climbing or how much you're lifting isn't placing value on who you are as a person. You're going in and punching the clock, making sure that you're preparing your body really, really well so that you're not getting injured, that you're actually putting in an investment for your future self. Like the more that you go in with quality movement and really good intention, like the more often you do that, the stronger and better you're going to be for longer.
Yeah, totally. So it really comes down to, meeting our bodies where they're at, and both mentally and physically. And just really making sure and asking the question, like, why am I here? Am I here to train, to learn and improve? Or am I here to perform at the gym and like to show off?
Mm.
And something I'd like to add to this, let's say to the weights at the gym, this idea of not wanting to look or seem weak is actually mostly about ourselves. Because the truth is that for a lot of athletes, even at the heaviest weight that you can do, there's probably going to be people in the gym that might not be warming up with that weight. Like
Mhm.
they're so strong that no matter how much weight you add to your, bar, it's still going to be very little compared to other people. So, I mean, you're not going to win a competition at the gym, right? But the interesting thing is actually that I find not all that many people care so much about what other people think for that very reason that I just said. But it's something that they care for themselves. Like they want to prove to themselves that they can choose or do the heavier weight. But if you really care about yourself and you really, care about doing the best for yourself, that's when you're going to choose the easier weight. So you can learn that movement pattern. So later down the road, you can actually add a lot of weight.
Mm.
Because that's the problem. If we're not really learning the motor pattern, then we're not going to be able to add a lot of weight down the road. And that
And
is true. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I would say like I'm not immune to this. Like I was like a couple years ago, it was like 2 years ago before I kind of hurt my elbow. Like I was deadlifting like 215 or something pounds for 5 reps. And then I just couldn't really deadlift because like holding the bar would hurt my elbow. And so, recently I'm getting back into deadlifting and there is a voice in the back of my mind, like after I'm done with my really what I would classify as like light sets because I'm getting back into it. There's a voice saying, "Hey, why don't you just try to feel like what does 200 pounds feel like? Can you actually do it?" I'm like, why am I having to do this? It's like I'm almost needing to like prove to myself that I was just as strong as I was a couple years ago. And it is fascinating. Like I really do hear a voice. It's like, oh, Mercedes, just like add more weight to that bar. And I do have to consciously like turn the volume down,
Yeah.
on that voice.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And same here too. I
Mhm.
think I'm someone who always likes to push, push, and go hard, hard. And actually, I have a deadlift story too. As you know, that I had also stopped deadlifting for a minute here. And I realized for myself that um, that's because I always thought I needed to go heavy on the deadlifts. And I got to a point that didn't feel good on my back. And I just didn't enjoy the deadlifting. So instead of just going easier, I would just not do it, which is really ridiculous. And like I talk to my athletes about this all the time. So what I started doing, so I went back to deadlifting and I just added 20 pounds less. And now I'm able to deadlift and I don't, feel like I'm gonna break my back. And now I'm actually still deadlifting, which in the end, I'm getting so much more out of it versus trying to go really hard, but then not do it because I put myself under that much pressure. That's what it came down to for me. I put myself under so much pressure that I need to deadlift like this much, which
Mhm.
really is ridiculous because
Mhm.
the difference is only 20 pounds. And I don't think those 20 pounds are going to make me like a superhuman. So it's just interesting what our minds do to ourselves.
Yeah.
Another huge pitfall that I definitely fall into, and it just happened to me too recently, is when we do work on endurance type drills or capacity drills. And the idea is that we want to try to climb kind of as many problems as possible at a very low level. Now, the problem is, most of us are here and we train because we want to climb hard. Like climbing really easy stuff is the opposite of what we want to do. And it's honestly the opposite of what people want to hear from a coach. Like when we tell our athletes we're going to make you climb really easy stuff, I have to spend so much time talking to our athletes, like to really dial it down. I only know one person who I work with who does a really good job on that, maybe two. So there's a few people, but most people just always want to go hard. They always go to hard. And I for sure do this. So when we do these endurance drills, the goal is not to get pumped, but let me tell you, when you know you can climb V6, and then we tell you for the endurance drills, you can only climb V2 and V3, that's really hard to do for people, And, but it's also really, really important. If we want to train, if you're here to train, if you're here to get better, that's what we need to do, is
Mhm.
work on these things that we don't like working on.
Mhm.
If you don't want to train, if you don't care about getting better systematically, then that's fine. Then don't train and don't worry about these drills. But if you're investing money and your time in doing these drills, then you might as well really, really try to do them. And as Mercedes was describing this voice in her head, which I love, is, you know, that's like your ego telling you you could do more, you could do more. It's like the greed coming out, you know. But is it really going to be good for your long-term health and vitality, which is why a lot of people are here and they want to train? It's not necessarily really the best for us. It's like having this friend at school who's nagging you on to do something you're not supposed to do. And you're like, oh, he's my friend. Shall I trust him or maybe not? It's like, I'm here to tell you, you know, trust your training plan and stick to it. So those are two areas where we see a lot of ego kind of hold people back from the training. So the first one was using too much weight or intensity when strength training. And the second one was going too hard when working on endurance or capacity. I have another one I would love to talk about, but before I do that, Mercedes, is there another area that you'd love to talk about?
Ooh, I wonder if it's similar. Yeah, I do have another example. Um, and this is avoiding a, a climbing grade or range for fear of failing. So let's say, um, you know, like, okay, like I know I can like flash V6 most of the time, but I do really well projecting V8. Um, and then I see this climb, like, so at the gym, let's say, you know, like, for me, my project level is blues and pinks, but there's this level which is orange and black where I feel like I should be able to flash everything. But if I see a black that's like, ooh, just a little challenging, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'll be able to flash that. I avoid it. I'm like, you know what? I'm just not gonna do it. Like
Yeah.
if someone sees me fail on that, man, you know, like people will think I'm such weak sauce. Um, and so there's like this mid-range that I think a lot of people will avoid because it's just going to make them feel or seem weak. And it's actually this area that's going to make you such a good climber. You know, if you approach those climbs, they're like the middle tier climbs, and we tend to avoid that. And this kind of ties back into like maybe you do like you get on this climb that you projected for like 10 sessions and you finally did it, and then you never go back to it because you don't want to unsend it.
Yeah.
Which is really funny to me. I used to have this. I used to be such a like I would avoid all of these climbs that I had done in the past, and I just projected so much, and I was like, I will never get back on that climb because that means I'm going to unsend it. But that is an indication to go back and try it again. Because it was like there was something about that climb that really challenged you, and because even if you didn't do it, it doesn't mean you unsent it. That is just not a thing. You've done it. Um, what it means to you is that you're actually going back and like continually working on some of the weaknesses that you have that came up in that climb. So yeah, to me, it's like those middle tier routes that people like to avoid. And that's the secret sauce almost to like getting you to become a better climber.
Yeah, I love that. We actually recently had an athlete in one of our group coaching programs, and you know, she recognized that about herself, that she doesn't like to work her weaknesses. So this one day she went to the gym with the goal to project the lowest grade climb that she can't do. So she would walk around the gym and she would find the lowest grade climb that she couldn't do. So instead of avoiding that, which was overhanging for her, she was like, okay, I'm going to project that, even though normally I project 3 grade levels above. And so that's a really wonderful way to approach that. And I also like what you said, this idea of unsending, because climbing training, a lot of it is really about refinement. Just because you've done something once, I mean, again, it's up to you. You don't have to go back and try it again. But if you do care about improving altogether, you really want to build that foundation in climbing movement, skill, and strength. And so refinement is a really big part of that. So Yeah, I love that a lot. And something similar happened to me recently where there was this problem at my gym. I was graded like maybe V4, V5 in that range. And most people I climb with have an easy time climbing those. And I thought it was really challenging. So I challenged my friends to flash that problem. And it was a really fun challenge because they couldn't do it and they climb
Mhm.
very hard things. And it
Mhm.
just became this climb that we really worked together and to figure out what the movement was. And it was really fun to do. So I encourage you to, leave your ego aside for a minute and try those lower grade level climbs that are challenging for you because you might just learn a lot of things.
Mhm.
Okay, the other one where I see ego perhaps holding people back is when it comes to skill work. We talk about this a lot, this idea of doing climbing drills and this idea of, oh, I'm such and such climber. Do I need to do this footwork drill or do I need to do this like something? All the drills that we have, they're so simple. Literally, they're made for kids. But the point is that we can all learn and improve our movement at any level of the grade. And they're really amazing. It's like going back to the basics. We love incorporating drill work into our warm-ups. Make it very regular. Once you make it a routine, it doesn't feel like this thing anymore. But really, the most basic drills, go back to them. Like come back to them and see what you've learned. Because a lot of learning kind of happens in this like cyclical nature. We do a drill, we improve, we notice something about it that helps us improve this drill, and then we go on and incorporate that into our climbing. Once we've become a better climber, we might go back to the same drill, but now we're going to learn something different because climbing movement is infinite. The possibilities of how we can move is infinite. So when we say footwork, we're not saying do footwork on the same climb every single day. That might get boring. You might not learn something new, but because the possibilities of movement are infinite, if you incorporate your footwork into these infinite possibilities of climbing, you're going to learn something new every single climb. And the better you become as a climber, there's something different you're going to learn because now you're able to move your body differently. So always go back to the basics, to the drills, and they're so, so important and so good, and really put effort and intention into them. Sometimes I feel like we program them and people are like, okay, fine, I'll do as a warm up, but they don't quite put the intention in. But it's the intention that you put in is what you're going to get out.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, do
Mhm.
the drills. If they feel simple, then maybe just challenge yourself on a different terrain. Like, I promise you, you're going to learn something from them.
Oh man, I I feel like I'm gonna call out some of my friends here, but also a client just last week. This person has access to outdoors. They actually don't have access to an indoor climbing gym yet. Like they could, but they'd rather just climb outside. And so they've done a lot of the easy stuff. But in order to build capacity, um, and to kind of come back from like some time off, you have to go and repeat all of these easy in quotation mark climbs. Um, and so like a lot of the drills I prescribed was like, hey, okay, you're gonna do some of these repeats, you're gonna do these like on the minute, every 3 minutes, something like that. And this athlete was like, that's gonna be really boring. I'm like, oh man. Like to me, that's like a red flag. Like, okay, maybe you don't actually like climbing, first of all, because you're not pushing yourself to really be in the moment as you're climbing. And you guess what? You could probably focus on other things, like maybe how your foot is pulling on this climb, or how far you're reaching or locking off with one arm. And so like all I did was, to try to reframe this, all I said was, how about like I challenge you to not be bored. What can you do to not make this boring? And so they ended up, yeah, like doing some really funny things. They're like, "Oh, I never even thought about doing this thing, and just engaging with it. So, you know, and I see a lot of my friends who like refuse to repeat easy stuff outside, um, because it's boring, or it's just not engaging. And again, I just feel like that is such a lost opportunity for one, getting fitter, getting stronger, but also just like learning,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I just actually heard something really beautiful. from, actually, she's a psychologist at Harvard. She was talking about mindfulness, and not in a meditative way, but how actual mindfulness helps people live longer. And that's her secret, and also reduce stress and just be healthier. And her definition of mindfulness was essentially the antidote to knowing, like not assuming that we know something, but to bring curiosity to any moment in our life and really be like, hey, what do I not know? And the challenge that she brought was this idea of everybody thinks they know what 1+1 is, and we just know what 1+1 is, and we're not even open to the possibilities that maybe we don't know. But then she was challenging the podcast interviewer. She's like, well, what's one pile plus one pile? If you add one pile on top of another pile, you still only have one pile. So 1+1 doesn't always equal 1. So the reason why do I talk about this? But what you said is like, let's say we're repeating easy things. Maybe if we approach it with this attitude of it's going to be boring, it's already easy, like this attitude of I already know, we just removed ourselves intentionally, and we did this to ourselves, from the learning process. But if you want to get better at climbing, which most people who listen to this podcast are, and if you want to enjoy it more, if you just bring this curiosity with, what is it going to feel like if I do something different? What if I try this instead of that? Anything. And people can be very creative of how they approach something. But I also actually like to think about doing the dishes. This is funny, but I have to do the dishes every day. It's just something that needs to get done. And that's sometimes how I feel about certain training. And I've fallen prey to this too. Like, I don't love endurance training because it's boring. So what I do instead, because I know it needs to get done, I really try to make it not boring. I try to bring in joy into my training. So I'm not just wasting an hour of my life, but I'm enjoying the hour and I'm getting better at climbing. And two ways of how I do with my endurance training, I actually, one, I listen to really fun podcasts. And also the way I do my endurance training, I do it in 2 sets. So I climb as many boulders as I can in 25 or 30 minutes. And what I do for the second set, I actually climb the exact same ones again, trying to climb them better and be more aware of my movement. So I bring actually like intention and movement into my endurance training. And all of a sudden, it's a lot more fun. But different things work for different people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that.
In our membership, I think we call this the beginner's mind, the
Yeah.
curiosity. So that is a concept we try to remind people of for sure. So yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah, it's especially a great reminder, which in our membership we do, work with a lot of older folks, and older is kind of a relative word. I would say 30 plus years. A lot of adults like to work with us in our membership, and it's interesting because we tend to get set in our minds sometimes. But I think people love climbing, and they love climbing training, and they love starting climbing training at a later age. I think because of that beginner mindset, because they enjoy learning new things and doing that with their physical body, and also feeling like they're doing something for their health and their fitness. Really, what it does is actually it brings back life to your years instead of just bringing years to your life. And so people are really enjoying that. Okay,
Love it.
well,
Love
that was
it.
a
That's so
that was a
cool.
fun episode. I like talking
Yeah.
about these things. So
Yeah.
if anybody has any comments or want to expand on what we talked about, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
We always like to hear from you. And if you are interested in joining or checking out our membership, we will be opening it up at the end of April. So depending on when this episode comes out, you have a chance to join then. It's a monthly membership, so you can join and see how you like it and leave anytime you want to. But let me tell you, it does get you. We have people who've been with us for years and they just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. I love it too.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, y'all. And we'll catch it in the next one.